Fears To Fathom. When I last covered this game, there were only 3 episodes to its name. Coming back a year and a half later, I realized that there are now 5. In the time span of this year and a half, many of you have asked me to cover the new and remaining episodes, and I am inclined to accept your request. I'm under the assumption that you've watched my previous video on this subject. If you have not, I suggest that you do. I mentioned a few things in that video that I feel like I shouldn't have to reiterate for every single new episode of this game. Like how every episode of Fears To Fathom is a true story that actually happened to someone. Last time I covered episode 1, Home Alone, where you are a 14-year-old boy who is home alone as someone breaks into your house. I will now be moving on to the next episode, Norwood Hitchhike, where your trust must lie in the hands of those you do not know, strangers. Your name is Holly Gardner, a 19-year-old who is driving back from a gaming convention quite a distance away from her hometown. She stated that the plane ticket to and from was expensive, so she opted for driving the whole way there and back. On the way back, however, the traffic on the interstate was atrocious, as per usual, so she decided to take a detour around the traffic, down this little back road that could potentially get her home faster than just waiting in traffic all day. But even a detour like that could not escape the fact that this whole drive to and from the convention was a little over 12 hours, and that's without traffic. So here she is in the middle of nowhere driving down this back road. She is around halfway through her drive and it is currently dark outside. While she is driving, she gets a few messages from her friend and parents talking about the traffic jam and the following detour. Her father saying that she should have taken the flight, and her friend telling her that she's gotta do what she's gonna do. After putting her phone down while driving, which is what you should all do, by the way, she cruises down the road with little to no distractions, which is one of the few upsides of driving down a back road. And then there's one of the downsides of driving down a back road. If you run out of fuel, you're gonna be there for a while. But thankfully, after a few more minutes of driving on a near empty tank, she luckily finds a gas station nearby. Parking into one of the pumps and entering the station, you ask the cashier for $10 on pump 2. After paying for the fuel, the cashier asks you if you're heading towards the bridge by yourself. Questioning why, he says not a lot of people head down there at this time of year, telling you to be careful and reiterating that it is not safe out there, saying that for a century people have gone missing down there, and that a monster had torn them to shreds and hung their corpses upside down from the trees in the woods. Holly dismisses this potentially fabled story before turning her back to leave. But before she can exit, the cashier begins to speak once again. He says that if she ever sees a woman in a white or blue gown trying to hitchhike, to never stop for her, claiming that it is some sort of ghost that seeks revenge for her death. Going on to say that she should never stop for any hitchhikers. The people who stick their thumbs out aren't as they seem. This fucking guy hit me with not 1 but 2 urban legends. Exiting the store and making your way back to your car, you get a text from your mother asking if you can pick up some dog food. So you now have to re-enter the gas station, risking hearing more nonsense from the cashier. Searching the store for dog food, you decide to make small talk with another customer there. You ask him if he knows anything about that story the man told you. He seems confused. You reword your question and he replies by saying, "Big mistake." A bit creeped out by that interaction, you pay for the dog food and head back to your car. Afterwards, you set back on the road again, as if nothing had happened.
Being on the road, you do realize a thing. Monsters truly do exist. And every single one of them looks just like you and me.
Holly's headlights suddenly start to flicker, a problem that was not prevalent before she stopped at the gas station. A car is seen driving in front of you, but a bit slow. Once you start to take note of how slow they're going, they suddenly speed up real fast and dart down the road. Holly's headlights keep malfunctioning, either flickering or completely shutting off at times, to the point where you have to manually turn them back on. Before she knew it, she was now on a dirt road which led to the bridge, the one the gas station worker warned her about. Driving on the bridge, nothing seems too odd. The view is quite nice and you can hear running water beneath the bridge. After getting across the bridge, you enter the valley. The dirt looks much more beige and dried out. The trees in the area are becoming much more sparse and don't really have too many leaves on them. Nothing too noteworthy though. The occasional animal runs out in front of the road and there will be a couple of abandoned cars and buildings seen, but nothing too weird. That was until Holly saw two logs conveniently blocking the road. Noting that the logs did not look like they had naturally fallen there. It was more like someone deliberately placed them there. Regardless, with the car that she had, there was definitely no driving through or around it. So she cuts off the ignition, making sure to keep on the headlights, and gets out of the car to move these logs. If you didn't have these headlights, you'd be pretty much not able to see anything. It is damn near pitch black outside. Considering how much your headlights were flickering earlier, that would really suck if they also went out right now. Thankfully, that isn't the case. Not wanting to dwell on those thoughts any longer, you move the two logs out of the way and get back into your car. To your horror, the car will not start back up. You check the hood and notice an alarming amount of smoke arising from it. Something is wrong with your battery, hence why your headlights were flickering. That is one of the telltale signs of a battery dying. So there you are, sitting in your halted car with no cell phone service and, I imagine, a finite amount of time before your headlights die. The only thing you can do is wait for someone to come and help. Holly says that her whole life she's been taught to not take rides from strangers, but here she doesn't exactly have a choice. Some odd minutes go by and she sees a car nearing in the distance, but it drives right past her. She didn't understand why anybody would do that to someone. 20 minutes go by. The headlights of your car have finally died with the remaining power of the battery, and you're now in pretty much near complete darkness. But once again, you see another car in the distance approaching. You stand off to the side to see if it stops for you, but just like the other car, it drives right past. Or at least, so you thought it did. It makes a stop a good distance away from you. Finally, someone kind enough has stopped to help. You go around the side of the car and greet the driver. You recognize him, and he recognizes you as well. The driver being that creepy customer we talked to earlier. He asks what you're doing out here, and you tell him that your car is broken down and that you cannot call for help.
Might as well tell him you don't have any weapons on you either.
He pauses for a minute, and then you ask him if you can get a ride. He asks where you're heading, and you tell him somewhere you can call for help. He tells you to hop in, but you need to retrieve all of your stuff from your car. The luggage that was from the convention and whatnot. He impatiently waits for you as you load up all of your stuff. If you ask to help, he says that it's not safe to get out. Hell, he might be just as scared as you. So you go back to your car and start collecting your things.
I love that if you try to carry more than 2 things, the game says,
I only had 2 hands.
The game is just like, you dumbass bitch. So there you are, alone, in the darkness, loading up all of your luggage. After walking back and forth from his truck to your car, each time carrying 2 pieces of your luggage, you do start to get this uneasy feeling. Even though help is right there, you can't shake this feeling of not being safe. It's an innate fear, and a valid one at that. I mean, it's the dead of night. You'd think it would be a good thing to have someone out there willing to help you, but is it really? Packing up the rest of your things, you tell the driver that you're done. He tells you to hop in, and you're finally back on the road again. After a brief moment of silence, the driver looks at you and asks where you were going. There's a good variation of things you can say, but I chose to tell the truth, that I was on my way home and the car broke down. He replies by saying his name. Super out of nowhere, by the way. Like, I didn't even ask, hey, what's your name? Just Jason. You and Jason exchange your names, and then it goes quiet again. Jason then says that Holly is very lucky for him to be around at this time, and that she is rather brave. Holly questions why he'd say that, and he replies with a counter question, asking Holly if she had any idea what happened to her car. Regardless of the answer you tell him, he disregards it. They then begin talking about what the cashier at the gas station was talking about. Jason calls the man an idiot, saying that the cashier tells everyone the same story. Holly, a bit unsettled, asks Jason if he believes in that story. He says he's never seen any monsters, but there are some things. Her car breaking down potentially being linked to that. And then he says something a little weird.
You don't bother them, and you won't be bothered.
Or at least I'm pretty sure that's a spelling error right there. He then apologizes for being a jerk back at the gas station, stating that he is not the best with people. An hour and a half goes by, and Jason actually turned out to be an alright guy. He dropped Holly off at a motel that offered roadside assistance. Before Jason fully drops Holly off, he says,
Be careful. There are all kinds of people out there.
Before driving off into the night. Holly was dropped off at a place called the Roadway Inn. Before checking in here, there is one noticeable, glaring discrepancy about the whole place, being that it has this hastily torn down, not approved for occupancy paper on the window. But at this point, Holly probably doesn't care. Walking up to the front desk, Holly notes that the clerk was giving off the creepiest vibes imaginable. She asks how much a room is, and he says it's $40. After paying, he gives her the key to room 9. Then Holly asks about the roadside help, which is $90. The clerk tells her that Tommy will take care of it in the morning. Before heading to room 9, the front desk worker tells Holly to not wake anybody. Shouldn't be too hard of a problem. On your way to your room, you get an influx of messages out of nowhere, meaning that now you've got some signal back to your phone, although it's not the best. You walk into your room and wow, no mattress. Besides that, the room does seem quite alright, all things considered. This is Tommy, the guy that the clerk mentioned would help with the car in the morning. Yet here he is in your damn bathroom of all places. Apparently Tommy is like a one-man army type of deal. He does just about anything here at the inn, from room cleaning to roadside assistance. You just happened to walk in while he was still cleaning the room, hence why you did not have a mattress. Regardless of who he actually is, he still looks pretty creepy. He tells you to go grab your things and wait outside while he finishes up, and you do just that. Coming back in after grabbing your things, he tells you that he talked with Joe, the front desk worker, about your car. He tells you that he will go and get it. Before the conversation ends, he mentions that the room's phone does not work. They haven't repaired it because there have not been many occupants, clearly. And just like that, Tommy leaves the room, hops into his tow truck, and sets down the road for your car. Considering that the drive here was almost 2 hours, it's probably gonna be a while before you see Tommy or your car again. Holly brings in the last bit of her things before collapsing into bed. She expresses feelings of cautiousness, like the place didn't feel right. Her anxiety about the area did not subside. She thought to herself a good way to calm down would be a cup of coffee, which depending on who you are can either make you sleepy or energized. or make you have to shit immediately. But I guess in Holly's case, it actually makes her sleepy. So she leaves her room and searches around the inn to hopefully find a vending machine that sells coffee. I tried settling for soda, but I mean, I guess she really wants coffee. Looking around a bit more, you do end up finding a vending machine that does sell coffee. More particularly an espresso. You buy the espresso, drink it, and start to make your way back to your room. Holly recalls that she was sedated. The espresso that she bought must have been laced with something strong as hell. In the story, she wakes up to the sound of a phone ringing, but not just that. She also hears movement. She is not alone in this room. Looking over to the phone, you try to answer it, but it's broken. You can't pick up any calls. Holly lays back down and keeps hearing shuffling in her room, like someone's hiding. The only reasonable place that one would hide in this room is the closet. Suddenly, a knock on the door deters you from going any further with it. Answering the door, you ask who it is, and the person says that it is Joe from the front desk. I assume he tried calling your room first, but the phone was not working. Reluctantly opening the door, you are pleased to see that it is actually Joe, and you can tell that he is immediately pissed off. He tells Holly that he specifically told her to not wake anyone else, and that he received a noise complaint that Holly was making a bunch of ruckus. He says whatever she's got going on in there just to keep it down, which in the moment didn't make any sense. Holly was asleep. Joe then questions why her eyes are super red. Holly mentions the coffee machine and how that the drink definitely was not just coffee, which causes Joe to be silent. Then he asks Holly if she's messing with him, saying that this inn does not have a coffee machine. She insists that she bought something from a coffee machine that really messed her up. And Joe goes off, talking about how sick he is of all of his guests not being sober. You bring Joe exactly to where that machine was, only to find out that it is no longer there anymore. Seeing this, you turn around to explain to Joe you don't know what's going on, but you notice that his demeanor has completely changed. He shouts at Holly to get back into her room quickly and that there is medication in the table by the TV that will relieve her from her symptoms. Rushing back into your room and checking the table drawer, he was not lying. This motel has free medication, but you do need to take water with it. Going over to the sink in your room, you realize that the closet door is now slightly open, and you remember that before Joe knocked on the door, it was shut. Somebody was definitely in your room while you were spiked and sleeping. Well, look on the bright side, at least they're no longer in your room. You get some water from the sink and you take your medication with the water. With nothing else left to do, you go back to your mattress and lay down to... You hear this inaudible whispering outside of your room before this man walks by the window and goes to your door.
Hello? Hello?
This scared the hell out of me. Up until this point, he is the only character in Fears to Fathom that actually has a voice. Every other character we have encountered is either through text or a speech box at the bottom of the screen, but this guy actually has voice lines. Maybe it's just me, but this caught me off guard so effectively on my first playthrough. He keeps knocking at the door and saying hello until you answer. Once you do, he says that he needs help and that you need to open the door. Refusing his request, he keeps knocking on the door and says that he knows you're in there. He then pleads by saying that he just needs to talk to you and that he is not a cop. You threaten to call the cops, and with little time to act, you hide in the only available spot in your room. Getting in the closet and closing the door, you notice the mic mechanic is back. This time, it is a more core element of the gameplay. In Chapter 1, it was primarily an Easter egg, where if you spoke into your mic while looking out the window, the intruder would look directly at you. But this time, you need to stay quiet. Joe notices the intrusion. He walks in the room, hides in a blind spot, and absolutely just fucking lays out the intruder. Well, what do you know? Despite giving off creepy vibes, Joe was still a really good guy. Holly explains that Joe did not want to get the police involved because it would have tanked the inn's reputation. But I think the reality of it was the cops would have shut the business down. Holly thinks that the area of Norwood was home to a cult or trafficking ring. Shortly after the event, Tommy brought back her car, and to this day, Holly never goes on long road trips. This was a horrifying story. A bit confusing at times, but nonetheless a story that will make you think twice about traveling alone. And it is such a scary thing to think that this type of scenario has and will happen to several other people. Getting sedated and then... I mean, there's no telling what that man did to Holly while she was sleeping. It's never specified from Holly's story, but it is implied. I mean, what do you think Joe meant by Holly making goofy noises enough to wake other occupants? There was definitely someone in her room before Joe got there, and this somebody did hide whenever the phone rang. If Joe had not shown up, that man could have kidnapped her afterwards. I mean, clearly she was still fucked up enough to where Joe noticed her red eyes and even demanded that she take this medicine in her room. The whole concept of this scenario by itself is already terrifying. Yet somehow the other things that happen in this episode are somehow able to propel it to more than terrifying. Because even though at most points of the story you are not alone, you still do not feel safe. Everybody that you come in contact with in Norwood gives you this off feeling. Nobody looked like you could actually trust your safety in their hands. At every turn, you're overthinking who the real antagonist of this story is going to be, tapping into that subtle fear of strangers that most people have. Almost everything in the beginning of this story points to Holly getting picked up via hitchhiking, and then the driver turning out to be a malicious person. I mean, the stories the cashier was saying, the circumstances of Holly being alone, the mannerisms of Jason, they all made you think that this is exactly how the story was gonna go down. When in reality, that's not at all what happened. Not even close. The story's titled Norwood Hitchhike, but the hitchhike was only like 5 minutes, which honestly subverted the hell out of my expectations. But rather than the driver being the main antagonist, instead this stalker that you had no clue was even tailing you was sneaking around this entire episode. Let me bring you all the way back to the beginning of this story. I want to show you the very second we figure out when this guy started following Holly. From that moment forward, she was being followed. Notice how that white van was going in the opposite direction of us, yet when we stop at the gas station, we can see it parked there. Not only that, you can see a man tampering with your car. Her car breaking down was not a fluke. I don't know what exactly he did, but it was enough to kill the battery. Whenever you exit the gas station, he swiftly gets up and goes back into his van like he was just doing nothing out there, and then drives down the road. At first glance, I thought it was the guy who broke into Holly's motel room, but taking a closer look, that's not him. There was more than one person pursuing you in this story. Putting this into perspective, I thought maybe that guy also was the one who put those logs in the road. But then I had to reconsider something. You see, the van leaves first, we get our fuel, and then a car goes in front of us. So if the white van drove ahead and put down those 2 logs, surely it would have blocked this car as well, but it didn't, which makes me think that the driver of this car was the man who broke into our room. I have more than just speculation to back up this claim. When you are really close behind the car, you can almost make out something odd about the back of it. You can't really see it that good in the game, but if you were to look at the model of this car, you will see a hand hanging out of the trunk. So these two have already kidnapped somebody. They're just going for a second one. Also, this car can be seen parked at the inn. The whole point I'm trying to make here is that this man has been following you since the very beginning. He saw that this young woman was alone, and even after seeing her get picked up by someone else, check into an inn, and get a whole room, he still did not ditch the plan he set in motion. I still have a speculation that the roadway inn was a landmark for a trafficking ring. I mean, think about it. Holly got drugged through a DIY spiked vending machine. Some kind of planning had to go into this. Do you have any speculations as to what was truly going on in Norwood? Do you think the gas station worker talking about that local legend was actually an allegory for a trafficking ring? Do you think Jason purposefully dropped Holly off at the roadway inn? Or maybe you think Joe was involved until he had a change of mind. If you have any speculations about what happened in this episode, be sure to discuss that in the comments section. Someone breaking into your house is already a topic that makes you want to double check your locks. But traveling somewhere where a persistent stalker not only follows and sedates you, but almost potentially kidnaps you for a supposed ring or cult is understandably on a different level of terrifying. But thankfully for Holly, that last part did not happen to her. If it weren't for Joe's quick thinking, she may have never seen her family again. All things considered, this story could have had a way darker ending. I'm glad for Holly's sake that her story ended with her still being here. Alright, that is about all I have left to say. If you enjoyed this video and want to see me cover the remaining installments of Fears to Fathom, be sure to let me know. If I missed anything in this episode, be sure to let me know that as well. Anyways, it's been me, Wazerbite, and I will see all of you in the next video. But don't forget, be safe out there.